that anybody who tells you that there was a ceasefire on October 6th was lying to you. On October 6th, Palestinians had no freedom whatsoever throughout the Gaza Strip. They could not go in and out of Gaza, no airport, no seaport, no jobs, no access to the outside world, no functioning electricity. And Israel continued to steal Palestinian land in the West Bank throughout that entire year and for decades, frankly, even before that, and had killed nearly 250 Palestinians in the course of just the beginning of the year until October 6th. So people who call that a ceasefire are basically telling you to accept a status quo in which Palestinians can be murdered, they can have their children thrown in military detention indefinitely, in which Palestinian land can be taken away from them at will, and they can be denied freedom. And that's an acceptable status quo so long as Israelis are safe. There's a word for that kind of world, and that's called apartheid. That is the current status quo that always existed leading up to the violence that we saw on October 7th. Now, certainly, anytime that you engage in violence against civilians, that is completely indefensible, and there's no way to excuse that. Nonetheless, thinking people look at the situation that led up to it and understand that imprisoning Palestinians by the millions for no crime other than being Palestinian in Gaza and denying them access to the outside world is essentially a recipe to create a wave of violence that is effectively inevitable. People who are serious about wanting to end violence and serious about producing a situation in which there is peace for both Israelis and Palestinians have to be concerned about the driving force of that violence. And the driving force is absolutely Israeli apartheid that has denied Palestinians freedom for too long. And until you solve that underlying problem, you're never going to get into a situation in which there is any safety or security for anyone.
You continue using all these buzzwords, apartheid, genocide, and those aren't what those words actually mean. But I do want to clarify a few things that you commented on.
It's nice of you to dispute them, but Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the UN disagree with you.
I shouldn't be speaking about killing children. There is a massive difference between a defensive war targeting terrorist targets that are using civilian sites, including UN schools, including hospitals, endangering their own people in the Gaza Strip, something that they themselves have admitted, and the invading of the sovereign borders of a foreign country and murdering children in their home on a Jewish holiday.
Let me ask Emily a question.
Emily, Gaza is not a defensive war.
Let me ask Emily.
Excuse
me.
Israel did not start this war.
If you could stop shouting over each other, let me ask Emily a question, and it's this. Emily, look, I think Israel had a right to defend itself, a duty to defend itself, but we now have, as we've heard, I think it's 12,000 children believed to have been killed. Another 20,000 or so have been orphaned. Two-thirds of Gaza has been flattened. And here Benjamin Netanyahu says after 4 months, well, we're nowhere near finished. There's months more of this. We will continue until the last Hamas terrorist is gone. OK, but that may mean the entire Gaza Strip is gone, destroyed, flattened. It may mean, well, hang on. It may mean the number of children killed doubles to 20,000, maybe 30,000. At what point does this become, even to people who support Israel implacably about this, does it become just utterly disproportionate?
Well, I think proportionality isn't the actual question here. There's a very easy way to end this war, and that is to return all of the hostages and to surrender unconditionally. That is what Hamas should be doing. That is where the focus and the pressure of the international community.
Hang on, but Emily, that would not.
Of course it would.
That
Those
would
are Israel's,
no. Benjamin
those are Israel's
Netanyahu.
true demands.
No, hang on. Benjamin Netanyahu has stated unequivocally this goes on until Hamas are finished, all of them. That means another 20,000 people have to be killed, right? Who are just the terrorists.
No.
So he's not going to stop if the hostages got released tomorrow.
But that's not true. I said
Netanyahu,
the unconditional,
Emily, let me finish.
Let me
finish my question.
Of Hamas.
I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu has any intention, even if the hostages get returned tomorrow, of letting 20,000 Hamas terrorists remain in power in Gaza. He's going to continue.
But that's. I already said that. I said the release of hostages and the unconditional surrender of Hamas. Hamas cannot remain in power in the Gaza Strip and have Israel restore a sense of security. Those two things cannot coexist. That is why Netanyahu said we will not accept any term in which Hamas stays in power, because they will do the same thing again. And the longer this goes on, the longer they stay in power, the more funding. I think the most recent document said 150 million went through Sinwar in the documents that the IDF found on the ground. The more money that Iran is funding,
Emily, you cannot just
the stronger Hamas is.
You cannot just kill everybody in Gaza. You can't.
Israel is not intending to kill everyone in Gaza.
If they carry on for many more months,
we are risking.
they carry on for many more months. how many people are going to get killed?
No.
I can't answer that question as to how many people are going to be killed, but I can tell you that not a single, not even one more person would be killed if Hamas surrendered unconditionally today.
All right, listen, we have
a... be killed.
Here, can I suggest something?
Yes.
May I make a suggestion? Since Netanyahu and his government have, before October 7th, have already, and previous Israeli governments, have murdered more civilians than Hamas ever did, why don't we flip this equation and say that the hostages will be released once Netanyahu and his government are taken to The Hague and charged with war crimes? I think it makes much more sense. The Israelis have killed far more Palestinian children and Palestinian civilians than Hamas or any Palestinians ever have. Israeli attacks on Gaza preceded Hamas by decades. Israeli attacks in the West Bank go on. Israeli attacks in Jerusalem go on where Hamas is not in charge.
Okay.
So, I mean, this whole Hamas excuse is ridiculous.
Okay.
Why don't we do this?
Okay.
Let's wait till we remove Netanyahu's government and then negotiate. I think that should be the condition. And the Israeli military, which is a genocidal terrorist organization, is disarmed and dismantled.
No responsibility for Egypt.
You know
Everything is always Israel's fault.
Emily, the problem. The problem with that argument. The problem with that argument is this: is that when it wanted to, at the start of this war, Israel had the power and capability to turn off the energy into Gaza, to turn off the internet, to turn off the water, to turn off the food supply. That is a form of occupation, even if you're not physically inside Gaza.